If we were designing a city from scratch, what would we do? My name is Andrew Cary. I'm co-founder, CEO of SNAAP Transportation. And we invite you to join us in this episode and these 5 segments, really taking a look forward in how would we design cities that are more human-centric, simply friendlier to get around, and take into account so much of the history and data and learning that we've all have at our hands. It's available to us. So let's go ahead and apply it today. So first of all, would we still design these wide 8-lane highways? And the answer is probably not. 8-lane highways are really a product of a completely different era, a time when the goal was simply to move people in masses, and it's actually as fast as possible. But what we've learned over the last few decades is that there's more lanes don't actually solve the problem. In fact, actually they invite greater capacity, greater induced demand. You build it and we're going to fill it. So, and then if we have the issue of land use, the ability to just continually gobble up land is ever more difficult, particularly in the United States, but also international settings, it will become problematic. So taking up massive amounts of space that could be used for housing or park green space, or better other economic activities is certainly ever important. But if we're starting from scratch today, we'd probably not design these massive corridors, but we'd probably design flexible node area, network area, multi-use areas that are adaptive, that support transit, micromobility, and different ways of moving around, not focused on historical movement of cars, but really multimodal, multi-layered applications and really the future of mobility. So when we look forward and again, glean from history, everything we were doing to stop moving people in cars, and again, adding another lane, building another bridge, these were all the common fare practices. And we would probably say that a great deal of city design to this day is really trying to apply the same practices going forward that are ultimately not going to produce that net positive result. We need to be more human-centric, focus on narrower network hub areas within cities, and then go from there in a multi-layered, multimodal application. So that's about future design, and of course there's going to be more than enough examples on how to apply that and retrofit. More costly, more challenging, but we are now in that urban season where there's a need to redesign the future of urban mobility, and multimodal, multi-layered applications are certainly going to be part of that future design system. Really want to start talking now about what density trends tell us about the future of congestion. Cities are not going to get any less dense. In fact, now layer in what's happening globally, that cities are getting ever more dense. More people are moving closer together than in any other point in history. But density itself is not the problem. In fact, density can actually reduce congestion, or if it's designed correctly, and that's a big or. However, when people live near each other, near work, near shops, and spend time, they don't need to travel as far. So often that's referred to as the happy city, the sustainable city, the 15-minute city. Sometimes I've referred to it as the ice cream cone city. You should be able to get an ice cream cone within 15 minutes walk of the front door of your home. So again, looking at how we look at human density in cities and then how we move people around is really needed to take a fundamentally new look. So the real issue is when density is paired with outdated infrastructure. So that's the core problem. We keep growing cities, adding more lanes, creating more demand, wider, greater land mass acquisition, and yet people are moving into these dense areas where none of those practices actually apply to the future of cities and the future of mobility, actually. So that's when these bottlenecks occurred, inefficiencies happen, and I think we all know it every day, all the frustrations around congestion. We often say is that there's two things, no matter who you are, where you live, two things you'll consider today: what you're going to eat and where, and then how to plan your life around traffic congestion. And that's just common. And often where we're in different cities or suburban areas in the United States in particular, we see the congestion problems, as we would say, over there. If we go on vacation and we have traffic, we get it and we tolerate it while we're on vacation. But when we look at the New Yorks or the Miamis or the Dubais or the Mumbais or Sao Paulo, we look and say, oh my gosh, how did it get that way? And then what do we do to solve it? So both in the discussion of future city design, but then its application into retrofitting, there's so much to learn about how we move people, not just moving vehicles. And then lastly, the future of congestion isn't really about how many people there are, but how to intelligently move them around, and for this dialogue, around urban centers. And again, we would emphasize the really forward planning of multimodal, multi-layer, future of mobility focused on networks and hubs, and then all of the layered options of mobility, the future of mobility, really around shared vehicles, autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, aerial mobility, and then of course we would also emphasize personal rapid transit as another really unrecognized part of the future of mobility puzzle. So now we're going to talk very specifically about expanding infrastructure, what we might call urban sprawl, and then just really rethinking it. So really for decades, we've spent all this time getting people into cars. Now how do we get them out? But the default solution has always been add another lane, build another bridge, and is always expansion in that urban sprawl. Layered into that, we can certainly add refining how we move people. Some of the conversations recently have about, we brought up park and ride, and for, depending on your generation, younger people say, what's a park and ride? For some of us that grew up with park and ride is where public transit would actually have bus terminal areas. You would go park your car and take a bus and then go to downtown to your work or whatever activity. And while that was a very popular activity, it's still, and depending on location and local culture and common practice, that is still very, very effective. I jokingly say, having been raised in the Seattle area, you're on a public bus, very common, park and ride, and it is as quiet as it can be. Everybody's reading. So again, it has its applications. However, people are still making choices about how they're moving around. And so when we talk about adding lanes and more roads, rapid transit bus lanes, high occupancy vehicle lanes are ever more present, but in and of themselves do not actually solve the problem of traffic congestion or in future planning. So now the approach is, it's not only expensive, it's slow, and honestly, it's actually outdated even when it's finished. And I think we could pick some examples of road constructions that either never ending, or ones that just ended and it's still congested. So really needing to look at a different mindset around that. So what's now emerging in this different mindset is not how to add more, but how do we make things work better? And that's, again, given a specific location, same density of people, how do we now plan for the future expecting that will be a recurring population growth model? And that means smarter routing. It's going to mean smarter integration between systems. And it's also going to talk about reducing friction across the entire journey. So really applications that will transition you from potentially underground travel to surface level travel to aerial mobility, or even elevated ribbonways and personal rapid transit systems. So again, the whole idea of expanding infrastructure, extending roads deep into suburbia, consuming more land. It's not often, I don't know what actually the number is, but it's not often that there's 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, the people that moved out into suburbia are now moving back into the city. This is a common pattern really almost anywhere you go. So again, we're looking at the difference between expanding infrastructure, the historical approach. We're really rethinking, if we're building a new commercial residential area or a new smart city design, how are we building that, and are we applying these same ideas of just add another lane, build another road, or are we actually looking at these nodes and networks and hubs and then smart mobility built into these new locations? Now, layered through all of this conversation is really about designing for movement and human-centric planning versus just the historic idea of we're just going to move cars. Our co-founder, CEO, Cal Chamberlain, when he was stuck in gridlock traffic, he would say, there's got to be another way. If we spend all this time getting people into cars, now how do we get them out? And so really not talking about just moving vehicles and people, but smarter ways to move people. And really what we were doing 40, 50, 60 years ago, there's so much new technology, whether you have the AI applications for really efficiencies, but also the multimodal, multi-layer options that are there. So again, this is where that conversation really starts to change. And historically, we've designed cities around those vehicles, as I've just mentioned. But people don't actually care about vehicles like they used to. In fact, increasingly, there's a lot less vehicle ownership. And so that invites a lot of these shared mobilities, the autonomous options, the different types of public transit, and I'm cautious with that one. And then, of course, the new inventions of personal rapid transit, aerial mobility, they're certainly going to be on the table. So the focus now shifts from moving cars to just movement, from speed of moving cars to now efficient movement of people. And I know that sounds nuanced, but that is really the root of what we're looking at doing as we do these future city designs. So that means, first of all, connections need to be seamless. We often use in our work around being sustainable, scalable, resilient, and seamless urban mobility. And while SNAAP Transportation on its own can really help alleviate a lot of the problems in the last mile, the last 5 miles, we certainly can run long distances in a nonstop manner, an A to B, and still be part of that seamless human-centered journey on a day-to-day basis, whether that's leaving the house, going to work, leaving home to go to school, and then other activities, or simply a better quality of life and access to mobility, accessibility, job creation, and local ownership. So again, that's the idea around those seamless connections. And it also means integrating things around the shared mobility, on-demand systems, and then eventually autonomous solutions. By themselves, an autonomous vehicle is really not going to be the silver bullet solve. Increasing efficiencies in batteries, efficiencies in autonomous vehicles, efficiencies around shared mobility. We would invite increasingly adding the layer of personal rapid transit that is sustainable and scalable and resilient, not causing new infrastructure or road construction or disruption. But again, these new layers of mobility that'll help move people around more efficiently, effectively, rather than always focus on vehicle movement. And at the end of the day, the goal isn't faster cars. It's just shorter, easier, and more reliable journeys. And it's funny, we can go a 15-mile daily commute to work and know that the first 10 miles will take us about 12 minutes. But the last 5 miles could triple or even worse our journey to work. And so how do we take 15 minutes and treat it as 25-minute commute instead of, 15 miles, 25-minute commute versus 15 miles and have it 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes and then really come at the end of our journey stressed out, traffic, that's the way it was, and now we got to plug ourselves into whatever activity we were heading to, work, family engagements, and quality of life. So again, we got to now really look at the areas of movement of people in efficient ways and seamless ways and not focus on vehicle movement. So again, that's a point of contention for this segment on or episode. The last piece of this dialogue is really around what would we do from building a city from scratch, and what would it actually look like? So if we put all of these pieces together that we've talked about already, what does a city from scratch actually really look like? And it probably doesn't sprawl endlessly outwards. So we have urban center and suburban and sub-suburban and then into rural. It's really instead built around nodes or network hubs and places exactly where people live and work, and it's their kind of quality of life, that 15-minute, that accessible city. And so whether that's accessible because there's a scooter, an electric rickshaw, a shared mobility, an electric vehicle, multimodal, multi-layered, maybe there's a subway, maybe there's a personal rapid transit system available. But again, the future of cities and these sustainable and smart cities are not just going to build new housing and new condominiums and new apartments, but they're going to build into their design the multimodal transportation systems. And again, mobility would be fully integrated. So we're talking bikes, pedestrian travel, the new technologies, all working together in that seamless way. Really, for all intents, very, very app-driven. And of course, as our societies are aging, and as well as people are really comfortable in adopting this app use lifestyle, the ability to walk out of your house, grab a ride, whatever that ride looks like, or comfortably go on a corridor to have the type of access to, again, entertainment, lifestyle, food and restaurants, employment, and so forth, is not always the walk out, climb in a car, and drive 35 miles. And so again, future design is going to be around nodes and networks, not sprawling urban centers, and again, extending out into new road construction and new bridges, and of course, the massive infrastructure that has historically ruled how we're not only future building, but also retrofitting into cities. And that would actually make things more adaptable and able to evolve, really scalable design, more flexible, rather than every being fixed, hard infrastructure that is so hard to undo and ever more expensive to rebuild and retool into. So really, what we're talking about now is maybe the real questions of whether we build 8 more highways, 8 more lane highways. It's really whether we're ready to move beyond them and start designing cities for the way we are actually living today. My name is Andrew Cary. I'm co-founder, CEO, and really we look forward to continuing these episodes really around the future of urban mobility. From our desk, the future of urban transportation is around sustainable, scalable, resilient, and better quality of life for all. So if you'd like to find out more, you can find us across all social media platforms at SNAAP, and SNAAP is always with 2 A's, Transportation. If you want information about, as a common person or a prospective business partner or even an investor, you can send an email to info@ridesnap with 2A's.com. We look forward to having you join us in our next episode.